Okay. All right, so as Anissa began saying, we have two main outcomes for today. First, we want to be able to identify a framework for designing authentic writing opportunities, and also evaluate a variety of roles, audiences, formats for and in which our students might write as they engage in authentic writing. Our ground rules, we began as close to on time as we could, but we will end on time. We'll make sure we take no more than your hour here today. Please stay focused and be respectful throughout our conversations today, and please assume positive intent. You're all here as learners and wanting to learn more about this, and you're all here taking time out of your Friday afternoon to be part of that. So please know that everyone else, no matter their truth or where they're coming from, is here for the right reasons. Please use the chat feature for any questions and responses that you might have, and we'll detail more of that in a moment. For those of you that are new to us, we do see a few new faces in our attendee column. And it's just as you are right now, please mute your microphones when you are not speaking. So speaking of the chat and questions, ideas, we love that when you back channel. We love when you are chatting in the background and using that chat feature to ask questions, share ideas, answer questions, so on and so forth. That gives us, not only lets you share ideas, but also gives us some insight of what's on your mind and what you see is most important, so we can address that going forward. We will track and answer your questions at a logical pausing point. I had a Q&A session near the end of the session or in follow-up communication. So if we don't have time to directly answer your question here today, we will make sure to follow up specifically with you. And to help us do that, we do want to let you know up front that the chat will be saved and recorded. And this allows us to do just that, allows us to follow up on any unanswered questions that we might miss in the chat, but also allows us to compile any resources and ideas that you have in our follow-up emails that we've been sending out to these webinars as part of these webinar series. So we just want to make, for those of you that are new to us in this session, we want to make you aware of that. So keep it clean, I suppose. In our welcome and warm up for today, I ask you to think about this. Authentic writing probably has at least as many definitions as there are participants in this webinar. What might it mean to you? Would you please feel free to go ahead and drop your definition in the chat, and I will split some duties with Anissa. We'll take a look at what you're thinking there in the chat and move forward from there. So what might authentic writing mean to you? Go ahead and drop a few lines or so in the chat. And Anissa will give you a chance to test your audio here. What are some things you see pouring in?
Well, so I see things about being used to that there's a purpose, it's truthful and thoughtful, not just writing, and that is engaging, that authentic writing is typically more immersive and can allow to have an authentic personal voice.
Okay. So just so we're all aware, the audio is still a little bit choppy. So Anissa will do her best to work on that, I am sure. She'll also keep monitoring chat in the background. But I will go ahead and split some attention back and forth here as well to try and keep track and answer any questions we see in chat. Please bear with us as we try and work it out. We see some additional thoughts about free flow or as the writing goes on. And so essentially that students own the writing, that it's meaningful to them. And that is really important, that we engage our students in that meaningful work, especially in this time when we know that work isn't as mandatory as it might be in other cases. Providing some authentic work that engages kids is definitely helpful in maintaining that engagement. So let's do a little bit more to define that around develop a what and a why around what we've seen some other definitions in the field talk about authentic writing and talk about why we might engage kids with that. So authentic work does a few things. First, it increases engagement by showing students the practical use of their knowledge. So authentic writing, I think it should be stressed, can happen in any discipline. Physical therapists write just as much as social scientists, write just as much as physical scientists, write just as much as anyone else. And so when we allow students to show how people in the, or show students how people in the field write and interact with material, that is certainly a powerful message. It also lets them use the knowledge and skills in the field to help others, right? Oftentimes, authentic writing can be presented in a problem-solving context. Here's this problem, or here's this lab we need to figure out. What can you as a student bring to the table to help us solve this entry-level problem, right? Where they're practicing and working as apprentices. It also engages students in something that extends the value of their coursework. So it's not just learning just to learn things. When we can find a real-world application for that knowledge, they have this problem to solve or this writing to engage in, that helps to boost their buy-in and boost their involvement with the activity. And it can help us to simplify grading a little bit as we can assess work from a variety of viewpoints. Meaning that as they are engaged in that work, we can look at them as apprentices, right, in the field, if that's the role that we ask them to write from. We can also look at them to write from a variety of different roles and for a different variety of audiences, as we'll explore a little bit later on. So we want to, our whole goal, role, and purpose in these sessions is to provide you with some practical strategies and frameworks that you can walk away with. And that today is no different. So we want to explore a framework to help us design authentic writing, no matter your discipline, whether you are a math teacher, to a science teacher, to a gym teacher, to a physical education teacher, or anything else. It's something that we think this framework is something everyone can access. And it's something that we've alluded to in a previous session, and that is RAFT writing, which stands for Role, Audience, Format, and Task. When we talk about role, we refer specifically to the point of view the author assumes while writing. Oftentimes, our students assume their own point of view, but we may, in any field, ask them to assume a different point of view, and we'll talk about some examples of that in just a moment. Audiences, of course, is who we're writing for and who we mean to read that writing. Format refers to a specific genre we're using, and as well as the technical aspects that belong to that genre. And topic, of course, deals with what we're asking kids to write about, whether that is a specific question, problem, subject, or anything else the students might undertake. And we'll address some of those a little bit later on. So we'll talk about each of those in detail and then share some examples of what this might look like in a variety of disciplines. When we talk about role, there's a variety of possibilities. First, you could write as yourself. You could write as a parent, a city council person, and I don't have to read the whole list to you. But there's definitely taking different personal viewpoints, right? Where you as a person or involved in the community, I can write from those perspectives. Some people choose to get a little more creative with the roles they assign. So one of the examples we'll show you in a little bit talks about the heart, posting a want ad for some other organs to work with. You might write as objects, and then we'll show some examples of that as well. So most of us typically tend to go to those first group of perspectives, right? What different people might think. But raft writing can certainly open up for these other characters as well. In our synopsis, though, for this session that we published, and that the reason why we hope you are here, when we think a little bit about writing in today's remote learning context, we know that students can write and publish a lot of work online. And so for authentic content that might be published online, we strongly encourage students to write as themselves. That gives them a little more buy-in, says, hey, here's my online persona. I can develop me as a person, develop an audience for my work, and really have people access what I think and share some ideas from there. And that's really powerful for our secondary kids to, well, for kids of any age, to really access and have that audience and know that what they're writing matters, that other people are out there that will read it and interact with it. So as we think about roles, one role they could take is a business owner. And in this case, it's a business owner writing to a school board, asking them to renew a contract rather for canine searches within their buildings. That is, so that's our role in our audience and our topic. The format here is the business letter, but that is certainly one example of a role we could take a look at. In another example, when I mentioned the heart earlier, we could definitely talk about the heart looking for other organs to work as part of that circulatory system that allows the body to work well, right? So there's another character or role we could take on in producing this want ad. As we talk about formats, it's one thing to keep in mind. We don't necessarily have to have extended or more formal formats like the business order. A help wanted ad could work here as well. Talking in more detail about audience and format, audience possibilities include a lot of different things. They could include other people in the field. You could, especially if I am a student writing as a student historian, I'm most likely going to be writing to other historians who might be interested in my work. I could also be writing letters to the general public or to policy and decision makers. I might write to specific people, a president of a company or board members of a company that I want to influence a decision with. Or I could have other characters, the heart looking again for other organs to work along with it in this case. Some format possibilities include the following. We talk about blogs, and there's a few platforms you might use, blogs or Campus Press, that are really student and school friendly in generating those things. You might ask students to engage in a podcast. So that takes some writing and pre-drafting before the audio recording happens, and Anchor is a fantastic platform for that. You could ask students to work together, work individually or together to create a wiki, and PBWorks is another student-friendly version to do that. And those are some of those high-tech, tech-heavy options that we might use. Of course, for students without access to technology, or for any student, we might ask them to engage in writing op-eds or persuasive letters, research reports, or some sort of fictional prose to help explore the viewpoint of this particular character that they're writing from. Additional formats, of course, are any piece of media that you would interact with, right? We could ask them to write an FAQ. We could ask them to write a how-to guide, lyrics, a play. Anything that you could ask a student, anything that you encounter as a piece of media is something we could ask students to get involved with.
And Randy?
Yes.
I'm sorry, can you hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
I called in on my phone. Is this a little bit better?
It is.
Okay, great. So Treva asked, what is a forensic report? So if it's okay, I'll jump in and say a couple more examples, Randy, and then you can add in any additional ones that you'd like.
Okay.
Okay, so the forensic report one is used really good for, oh my Lord, I need Miss Dooley to teach me English. Is really good for science class. What I've seen some teachers do is they actually use like one of those whodunit mysteries where they give the kids what was the crime or what's the mystery and a little bit of the information. And from there, the kids create like a report or something that they would give the lead detective to say, okay, here's what we're thinking based on the evidence. Here's the evidence that we have and what we feel it is. So that would be an example of the forensic report. Another one with the how-to guide, one of the things that I've seen, having kids be able to write very succinctly of how to is a struggle for a lot of them. So whatever your class is, if there's anything where the kids can build something, then they can create a how-to guide for that. And they can also include pictures to go along with that if they want. And then for the survey with analysis, Lisa, you had mentioned using Raft in your math class, and here's another good example of that. that we've seen in some classrooms where the kids are asked to write a survey about some kind of hot topic, whether that's like within the school, you know, very specific to kids, or the broader general public. They do a survey of as many people as they can, they analyze that, and then they write an implication of the results, or maybe even an argument letter to change a policy, just depending on what the topic is. So those are a couple of additional ideas.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being diligent in connecting audio with us and being part of the conversation. So certainly those are all great examples. And what that last item brings up for me in terms of that survey and issues analysis is being mindful of the match between audience and format. So if I'm thinking about students taking a survey, we want to make sure the audience that they choose is an appropriate one, right? If likely they might not publish that in an academic journal, but they may publish that in a school newspaper to be able to influence some opinions that way, or they might write a letter to the principal to influence some policy that way, right? So as we think about selecting audience and format, or giving students a choice of audience and format, make sure that they make sense to each other. The president isn't likely going to read their blog entry in most cases, or the president of anything probably won't read their blog entry, whether it's a corporate president or anything else. And the general public, so Joe Schmo off the street, is probably not going to read your extensive research paper, right? So we want to make sure that when we are choosing an audience and choosing a format, that they match in terms of register and in terms of tone. And we also want to make sure that, especially in this context, one thing we have preached in these sessions is that as teachers, and in this stressful time, you only have so much capacity to learn more technology, right? And students also have the same limited capacity to learn more technology, at least to learn and use that well. So if you are going to choose something like a blog or a wiki, consider your own familiarity and consider your student familiarity with that platform. We provide those examples because there's a variety, there's a continuum of readiness, right? And a continuum of familiarity with these resources that you might have. But if that's something that you have not yet asked students to do in the school year, or you know your colleagues haven't asked to do that below you, that might not be a great first step. Thinking more about some of the more traditional options, like an op-ed or a want-ad, that is something a little bit less technology intensive, it might certainly be a good first exposure to this sort of writing. So as we think about those formats that Anissa and I discussed, and as we think about some of the audience issues, we'll ask you to engage in a stop and jot here and drop some answers here in chat. First thing we ask you to think about is what possible formats you think your students will be most engaged with, whether that's from our list or from your own personal opinions. And also, what additional ideas have come to mind regarding using authentic writing with your students? So again, not necessarily restricted to the formats that we talked about or even just listed. What else has come up for you as you've thought about this? Please feel free to go ahead and drop a few thoughts in chat, and we will highlight some of that thinking as it comes out. Anissa, and as you're back here with us, and hopefully your audio holds up, what are some things you're seeing in chat as far as formats that people might find engaging?
I see a lot of people are saying things like blogging and reviews are things that they feel that the kids would really enjoy. Just anything where we feel our own students might have that more of that ownership. A couple of people were talking about the 2 to 3 minute mysteries and how to make sure to kind of, you know, how they could have the kids write about it. Hold on a second, I'm reading. And also write invitations to their parents to conferences or school events, just again to help increase the parent engagement as well as the student engagement. I was sitting in on an ELL teacher's Google Meet yesterday, and they were doing letters of appreciation. And so, of course, with Mother's Day, some of the kids were doing that, but not all the kids have mothers. And so they were talking about all the different other people that they could do, but they were doing a letter of appreciation to someone.
And thank you for sharing those thoughts, and thank you for those of you who are highlighting thoughts. Definitely, as I scroll through the chat, as I'm able to hear, now that I've had a pause, I definitely see a lot of people talking about blogs and reviews and letters, right? And certainly those are some of the more accessible writing formats and what's right on hand, right, for us to be able to grab. So certainly at this time, right, we don't want to push the envelope too much in terms as far as what the students are familiar with, for all the reasons, you know, we talked about a few moments ago. But when we have an opportunity to select a variety of formats or give students a choice in the format they might write in, that's certainly another powerful tool we can use to engage students within these sorts of assignments. Anissa, I'll let you speak a little bit more to some of the examples you pulled up here, because this was going to be your part of the presentation. So I will be your Vanna here if you will be my Pat.
No problem. So with this first one, this is a review that a student wrote based on his animated short that they watched. And it's from Amazing Kids Magazine, which is one of those opportunities that we have for kids to publicly publish their work for free. So we wanted to point that out. The other thing is that for any of these that we're showing you, Randy and I will be sending that information in a Google Sheet along with the links and what grade levels that those might be accessible to. Okay. So this next one then, as several people said about blogs, this is Stuffy's blog, who's I believe an upper elementary school child, and she's talking about Old Maid. I believe they were asked to write about a game that they've played lately. So this is the beginning of the shutdown for them, but the whole class has a blog. And that teacher made that blog on EduBlog, which is another free resource that we have. But again, as Randy said, really dependent on our own personal comfort level as well. Okay, the next two are actually from the New York Times Learning Network. It's not the New York Times itself. It's a completely separate aspect of the website, and it's specifically for kids and for educators. In this instance, one of the things that they have is they usually have pictures, I believe, once a week. They have some guiding questions for kids, so it is a little bit more on the traditional side in terms of commenting and responding. But it really is another great way to get kids involved in current events and what's going on in the world, and to use those inference skills that Ms. Dooley pointed out in the chat earlier. And then the other thing that the Learning Network has is they have articles, and then they ask the kids for opinions. So this is really tapping into that opinion aspect. And again, you see in the screenshot, there are several comments. The comments can reply directly to the article, or they can reply to others. We can do this ourselves in our own classroom, in our own Google Classroom. The Learning Network is another opportunity to do that, that opens it up beyond our Google Classroom walls. And then for our kids who are more creative, or if we have that opportunity to have some of those more creative aspects, there are several websites that allow kids to submit work. Some of it is fiction, some is nonfiction. There's also graphic aspects to it. But this is an example of a poem that a child put up on a website called Underlined. And then you'll notice at the bottom there are comments, so the kids can also comment on other students' work.
So Anissa, with the
Yes, ma'am.
you called it the learning something. So
Network.
Learning network. This allows the student and the teacher to view a particular document, and then they have the ability to type, and we can see this on the screen while teaching in the virtual learning sessions.
Yes, actually, because I actually went to one of their webinars, Jennifer, and that's exactly what we did. We looked at one of their articles and then we practiced on the commenting, and there's a couple second lag, but not much. It's not more than about 2 or 3 seconds. And then I could see everybody else and what they posted in the comments as well.
Now the Learning Network, is this something that the district has authorized and already approved, or is this something we would get through IRE, or how do we access this Learning Network?
Right, so it's through the New York Times, Jennifer, so we're just bringing it as an example. It's a good question for everybody, no matter where we're at in the country, to just double check and make sure that it's approved by the district. I don't know why it wouldn't be, but it's good to ask. It's through the New York Times. It's free to all educators, and again, you'll get the link to that, and you and I can talk about it more off of the website. Yep, we sure can. You're welcome. Okay, all right. So one of our other examples comes from another free website that kids can post to. It's called Inkspire, and they are they're big on all sorts of different formats of writing, including informational. And so again, it's one more time where the kids can post and also read articles that are written for and by students.
These articles, Anissa, do they give us the Lexile and everything, the levels, or do we?
So that's right. So that's a good question. On Inkspire, like those that the kids can upload to, not that I'm aware of. I didn't see that. I think because it is so much of a, a forum where the kids can do that. But there are several, like Newsella and ReadWorks and Think, well, I have to remember what it is, but it's the Smithsonian one. And I think some of the New York Times also has it. So there are some other sites that do allow you to do that. Okay. All right, and then our last example right here is, again, a free one, Storybird, where the kids can upload. And in this case, they can also do like graphic novels or comics. So again, just some different ways that the kids can present and publish their work if that's something that you're interested in. Either way, these are all good examples of authentic writing that we can have the kids do. The question is a matter of, do we have them published to our Google Classroom and to ourselves, or do we have them published to the world at large? And that's the question to ask ourselves. Okay. And then we've talked about the role, the audience, which really are one and the same in terms of the ideas. We talked about format and looked at several different examples. And so now this slide looks at some of the topic actions. The topics are very, very specific to us in terms of our subject area. So it's either we're working specifically on an ELA standard and possibly connecting it to a text, or we're working on our content-specific standards. Either way, it's actions that really help to inform and make that writing intentional. So whether we're asking kids to write to convince someone, to simply discuss something, to write to inform, whether they're critiquing, whether we want them to interview someone to gain more information, whether it's a creation or teaching somebody, whatever that is, just keeping in mind those really strong action verbs that really help to put that intention in the writing, that help make it authentic of why am I writing this. And so,
Oh, I'm sorry.
oh, question? Yeah.
I was going to inject, part of that was the DOK, depth of knowledge. Because when you
Yes.
look at those, you can measure those. So you can measure design or critique, inform. You can measure those things, analyze. So those are, as you said, the action verbs, but that will give people that DOK.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Absolutely. And authentic writing typically does lend itself to being more complex and higher on that DOK level. So that's also the positive strong point of it. All right, so for this, we've talked about the role, audience, format, and topic. And something that Randy and I wanted to bring forward and ask anybody else to share that's done this type of writing with your kids is student choice and voice is really important, as we know, especially right now, to try to continue to grab more and more of our kids and bring them into the fold as we go through and finish up the year. So one of the things that as the designer we have to think about is what's teacher decided and what's student decided. There are some times where we could really just give it all to the kids and say, pick a topic, let me approve it, but pick a topic, decide on what's the format of your writing going to be, who are you going to write to, and are you going to write as yourself or are you going to take the point of view of someone else? That would be very open-ended and something that we could do with the kids. Another thing we could do is we could give them every one of those, or we could give them 2 of the 4 and allow them to choose from a small list for the rest of it. So this is something, especially around the role, if we're really wanting the kids to see different perspectives or the audience of how a concept might affect different audiences, we might have them select from a small list, but the format and the topic in that case might be the same. So just something to keep in mind as we're doing that. And then, go ahead.
Question. So when we look at the role, the point of view that the author assumes while writing, are we taking that from the real point of view? First, second, third person? Are we doing, or is this, are we trying to marry those two for the kids? The true sense of writing from the first, second, and third point of view, or is that what we're pushing, or we're just trying to say the role?
So it's writing as like trying to put yourself in that person's shoes. So for instance, thinking about that business letter that Randy showed us at the very beginning, that business letter was written, the role was the business owner. And he had a company that had the drug sniffing dogs. The children were asked to write that letter from the business owner's point of view and write it to the district to say, here's why you should continue to pay my company and use us. So it's really trying to get the kids to focus on that point of view, that perspective from other, from other people's lenses.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Because when I see point of view, I'm looking at first, second, third person, third person limited, third person.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at that
right.
perspective. So we would just have to fine tune it for them just to take the position of where the writer is writing to. So
right.
I would marry role and audience opposed to point of view, because it's really not point of view as we know it for literary element.
It's perspective, right, the perspective.
So perspective would probably be better than using the point of view. And I think as we align more of the curriculum, that the language and terminology is going to be imperative, because point of view, I would have went to point of view, but perspective kind of it's the same, but it's not. There's some distinct characteristic differences. So those two might want to look at that when you go back to your team and kind of massage that a little, or at least put perspective again. But that's my ELA.
No problem. Okay. No problem. All right. So yeah, it really is around getting the kids to see that perspective of whatever the topic is from multiple vantage points. Okay. Randy, we can go ahead.
Yes. So one thing that might be helpful for those of you thinking about this for the first time or two is some of the places where it's easy to give a lot of freedom is role an audience. Especially in this context where we find ourselves, where we have different familiarities with technology platforms and so on and so forth, it might be more user-friendly on your end to limit or to either prescribe or limit the formats to a very select few at students' first go-around, and that saves you some of the potential guesswork and headache of trying to assess a variety of different writing formats and genres as you go forward. So that's one thing to keep in mind as you're thinking about what might be helpful for students to choose on their own and what might be helpful for you to prescribe or choose for them as you continue to develop your own assignments and your own work here.
Okay. Randy, do you want to go ahead and take that last one?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So the last thing we want to be mindful of is we know Miss Dooley is very much an ELA teacher, but we also know that not everyone here on the call with us is. So we want to talk about some different ways we might assess and communicate some expectations for that. So we want to share a sample rubric with you, and this will be attached to our follow-up email as well. But just to briefly highlight some of the different things that we can look at or not look at as opposed to the writing, in regard to the writing. First, when we look at role, really what's important to us is we want to know that students have chosen the role, right? And we want to make sure that they have a rationale for that role, and then we can see why that role, if they've been made that choice, how that role fits into the situation. If we were to prescribe a role to students, that first row might read pretty differently, and we might ask them to say a little bit more. I might read to describe how well the students stuck in that role or stayed in that role while they were writing, and whether or not they may maintain that perspective. As we move down to audience, this one is pretty static. The who we're writing for is either very clear or very unclear. And as we choose details and we choose the voice and the personality that we attach to the writing, they either connect to our audience or they don't. So that is one thing to be mindful of as well. In terms of format, we either follow the format, we either write a business letter or we don't write a business letter. We use the details and voice that match a business letter, or we don't do that along that continuum in varying degrees. The one that is probably most ELA heavy, but really speaks to content literacy among all disciplines, is the topic area, right? Where the introduction, no matter what genre we're working in, we should be able to figure out what kids are writing about. There should be some details that support that topic, and those facts and details they're providing should be accurate ones. So we want to be mindful of the fact, for those of you who might not feel comfortable in the world of, I'm not an English teacher and I don't grade essays, that you don't have to, right? We're not asking, in this particular rubric, writing conventions and things of the sort, and grammar and commas and semicolons and comma splices are not part of what's being graded here. And that's an important point we wanted to lift. If we can grade these 4 things, how well students stick to the role, to the audience, to the format and topic, we can tell them a lot about the quality of their writing and how well they adhere to the requirements of the assignment. For people who are more comfortable in grading some of the more technical aspects of the writing, certainly add those dimensions to the rubric. There's a lot of places for that. But we want to provide a jumping off point for folks who may not be as familiar or comfortable with this sort of activity as they think about how it might work for them and their kids. So as we bring ourselves to a close here, we do want to first pause for any questions and answers that you might have. Please feel free to drop them in chat or to unmute yourself. And as you are drafting those questions, we'll give you our usual end of the webinar spiel here. So please do give us your feedback. That survey will be coming to you momentarily, if it's not already in your inboxes. We use it to track attendance to help give you credit for, it's the best evidence we have that you were here along with us. So please complete that survey to earn credit for that certificate in June. And we do have an exit ticket today that's part of that survey, as many of you know. And the exit ticket reads this: suppose you wanted to implement or refine your implementation of one of these strategies in the coming weeks, whether that's writing a blog, whether that's writing a business letter, whether that's giving students lots of choice or limited choice. What would you need to communicate to students, families, and your team to help support the success of that activity? And we really want to stress the idea of families in this case. When you are choosing to have students publish content online, what might that communication look like to your parents, your administration? What might that look like as you think about that conversation and some of the risks that might come along with that? Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. I will go ahead and turn it over to Anissa for any parting words she has to offer, and we'll take some time for questions and stick around here at the end here as well.
All right. Thank you, Randy. Thank you so much for being flexible with us with the technical difficulties that I'm having. I'm not sure why, other than it's really, really windy. So yes, once again, for everybody, we will be sending out all of the examples that we talked about, along with the links to that for any of them that you're interested in, as well as the rubric and some additional examples of raft writing, of authentic writing, just to get the creative juices flowing. But if you have any other ideas, feel free to share, because that's what this is all about, is trying to share with each other as we continue to think about how to engage the kids and give them some really authentic and meaningful work over the next few weeks. So thank you guys. We'll be around if you need any questions. As always, don't hesitate to reach out as well if you'd like to talk to Randy or I off the call as well. So if not, have a great, great Friday and weekend. And I hope the weather wherever you are stays good or it gets better.
Thank all of you. Like we said, we'll be sticking around here for just a moment. So if you have time in your schedule and you want to run an idea by us, please feel free to.
Hi, my name is Gail Gurdon, and I got a call from a coworker, and we spent the first part of the webinar on a phone conference about another student. Let me see if I can get real quick in my own quick mind, understand what I'm supposed to do here. I'm a special ed teacher, so when I give you your feedback today, I'm going to choose limited choice for my family so they know that their students are going to have some anonymity as far as what they're doing. Is that correct? Is that what I kind of understand the assignment is supposed to be? Does that make sense to you?
Yes. So the exit ticket asks you to briefly think about what kind of communication would be helpful. So Gail, it sounds like you're on the right track in terms of thinking about what would be helpful to communicate to both your students and their families in this particular context.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure of. Thank you.
You're welcome.